Hi, everyone. It's Ashley with SurrogateFirst, three-time surrogate. I have the pleasure of introducing you to Denise, who is part of SeedTrust Escrow. About 95% of our parents work with you and love your organization and all that you guys bring. And I thought that it would be really important to cover importance of escrow being set up and how to protect a surrogate and intended parents. I know you've got a lot of knowledge and have been in the industry for years. So I'm so thankful you made time to speak with us. If anyone watching this video has any questions, you can reach out to myself at ashley@surrogatefirst.com, surrogatefirst.com. And I'm sure Denise will give you her email or her contact. We'll also make sure to put it into the descriptions wherever we post this, so that you have a direct link to be able to schedule and get more information about Seeds. Thank you so much, Denise, for coming and joining me for this webinar.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me, and we love working with you and all of your intended parents and surrogates as well. So thank you.
No, we appreciate you. One of the biggest things is I hear on, I've been in the surrogacy field now for going on probably pretty close to 8 years. And I will hear a lot of times like, well, do you need an escrow? And I'm like, yeah, you do, even when it's family and friends. So I thought I would love for you to kind of just share a little bit about how you guys got started. Yeah. I know you guys have some really impressive bells and whistles on, your insurances, and you've been licensed in different states. And so I would love to kind of hear a little bit more about Seeds, and then ask you some of our top questions that parents and surrogates have.
Awesome, no problem. I've been in the industry for quite some time, but prior to moving into this particular professional space, I was an intended parent myself. And so I have 3 boys that were all born the same year. We adopted and we did third party, and it all came together in 1 year. So our identical twin boys were born 4 days before our oldest first birthday. He was adopted, and we used an egg donor to help complete our family, and our egg donor only produced 1 egg, and so it was deemed a failure. But the moment they, so we did a day 3 transfer. This was back in 2008, and we didn't think that anything was going to come of that, but in fact, we got an additional baby out of the whole scenario. So the embryo split within 3 days of it being transferred, and so I have identical mirror twins. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that is intense. You guys went from 0 babies to 3 in like under a year. Like it was like, what, first birthday, boom, now you got twins.
Yep. Yes, as a matter of fact, our oldest celebrated his first birthday in the hospital room. And so, because I have personal experience with this, I really am passionate about making sure that everybody involved they have the highest level of protection and security, and that there's full transparency. I think no matter if you're working with an egg donor, a surrogate, or what have you, there needs to be that clarity and that transparency and the highest level of protection. So I've been with SeedTrust for now 3.5 years almost. And you asked, how did the organization get started? So we have 3 owners. Our founder, Edward Brock Schmidt, we call him Brock, is a CPA. And he owned his own CPA firm, and one of his clients happened to be a surrogacy agency, and they tasked him with finding the most secure escrow provider in the space that provided transparency. And when he went to go seek out who could provide the highest level of protection for the agency and all of the parties involved, there was no good solution at that particular time. And so he quickly started this company and started to build a software so that everybody could have the transparency and see everything in real time. And shortly thereafter, he brought on Roland Saloom, who is an attorney, and he is our COO, and he manages the staff of legal managers who are paralegals who manage all of the disbursement requests that come through and are being approved through our management protocol. And
It's a
thirdly,
lot.
yeah, it is a lot. And then we have Adam Winder, who is our president, and he has a banking background. And so, we have this great group of folks, and there's a lot of checks and balances within our organization because of all of the expertise. So we are fully independent. We do not have any, we don't own an agency. We don't own a law firm that drafts contracts for surrogates or egg donors or their intended parents. So we are fully independent. We are a neutral party, and we serve to protect everybody involved, including the agency.
That's amazing. And that's actually an important topic to talk about is, sometimes a lot of parents actually will come to us and ask, do you have an in-house escrow company? Do you have an in-house attorney? Mm-hmm. And there are other agencies that work just fine with that. But one of the reasons we explain that we don't have an in-house escrow is because we want to make sure that their funds are protected. Mm-hmm. Sadly, I've seen agencies close down and take the intended parents' money with them. And so unfortunately, we had an employee who was an intended parent and 10 years ago went through the process, and the company, closed down with her monies, and she lost $50,000, and like 10 years later was still in litigations with courts. And I was like, I don't want that for you guys. We have a solid foundation. I don't see us going anywhere. Right. But for the best interest of our parents, it's safer to have someone who's set up like you guys, who have the years of experience. You have the financial background and foundation, and you have the insurance policies.
That's right. So before I moved over to SeedTrust Escrow, I worked for a very large surrogacy and egg donor agency. And one of the projects that I tasked myself with was to seek out the escrow provider that offered the highest level of protection for everybody involved. And when I went through that vetting process, one of the questions that I asked of every escrow provider that I was interviewing was, what is your bond? What is your insurance, and what is your bond, right? And so at the time, I think the highest bond that was out there was around $250,000. And when you think about the cost of a surrogacy journey,
that's insane.
Bond, right? That bond might cover not even two surrogacy journeys, right? Depending on what stage they're at. So one of the things that I really liked about SeedTrust Escrow was their level of insurance and bonding. And so we have a $40 million bond that protects every dollar that we manage on the surrogacy side and we hold on the egg donor side.
That's incredibly, important. And I think that speaks volumes about your care for your clients. And making sure that, because so many parents sacrifice years, pick up second jobs, garage sales, loans, refinancing of homes to get to this point of being able to grow their family. And if God forbid something happened, this is their only shot. So that's why I love working with you guys, because I know that you're looking out for the intended parents. We'll talk about the surrogate side too, because you guys are amazing at making sure to protect the surrogates, but I really do appreciate that you guys have those bonds to be able to protect your clients.
Absolutely. And, when I look at this from an intended parent point of view, when I was back there in, your client's shoes, there's a great risk involved in this. There's no guarantee that there will be the outcome that everybody's wishing for and hoping for, right? So making sure that those dollars are safe and secure is critical, right? So we definitely take that seriously. And because we are a neutral, independent third party, what we're doing is we're really protecting the money so that the intended parents can really focus on the relationship that they have with their surrogate, and really focusing on that and the pregnancy and enjoying that part of the process, right?
No, I definitely agree with you. I would say, so that's one aspect that protects, the intended parents. Would you share a little bit more about how an escrow and how Seeds protects both the surrogate and the intended parents when they're going through this process?
Yeah, so we manage escrow. We don't just hold it, and there's a big difference. when we manage escrow for surrogacy cases, whenever there's a disbursement request that is being submitted, we are checking that disbursement request against the language of the direct agreement that they've signed with the surrogate. And so the first step is having a contract. So you mentioned, should intended parents, let's say if they're even matching independently, should there be a contract? Absolutely, 100%. There should absolutely be a contract. Secondarily, there should also be escrow in the provisions of that contract. And so making sure that when we're managing the escrow process, we're managing against the contract. So every time a disbursement request comes through and is submitted, we're checking against the language. If it doesn't meet the language of the contract, then we're going back to those intended parents and asking them permission to pay for the disbursement request that comes through. Sometimes that will require an addendum to the contract, or it might require a written approval, because we're taking on the liability. We want to make sure that we're protecting all of the parties. And so by doing that, we're saving those intended parents money too, because, if something gets submitted accidentally, so as an example, if something gets submitted twice, and this happens because people are human, right? If we have receipts sitting on our desk and we submit disbursement requests, if we're the surrogate and we're submitting, we put that, stack of receipts next to our computer, and then next month they get somehow mixed in with the other receipts that are submitted. We're not just checking against the language of the contract, we're also making sure that that wasn't already approved and processed and paid to whatever the party is, whether it's the surrogate or the clinic or the attorney. So we do that check process, and we're also checking against the receipts. So we know that there can be data entry errors. We have an online platform that allows people to submit. And again, we're all human. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. So somebody might type in $54.03 when the receipt is $45.03. So we're checking against the documentation on top of the language of the contract. So we're really making sure that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed to ensure that everything happens the way that it should, and that we're protecting everybody, and that those details matter, right? So given the fact that we're taking on the liability, if we make a mistake, we have to eat the cost of whatever that mistake is. It could be small or it could be very large. And we want to make sure that we're checking every single detail.
You said something that was just like, it's so simple, but so profound. The difference between holding escrow or managing escrow. And I've worked with people who hold escrow, and I've worked with people who manage escrow, and there is a huge difference in that. And almost, I would say, as an agency, when you manage escrow, obviously we still are looking at things. We're still concerned about making sure that, the surrogate is fairly compensated in what they agreed upon, and also that the parents aren't being overcharged. But to have you guys as that backup and that safety net of like, there's another set of eyes, there's, that we're all working together for the same goal of what everyone agreed upon. And I've never even thought of that as like, I just thought escrow is escrow, but you're right. There's holding and there's managing.
Yeah, holding is essentially just processing, and it's a pass through, right? So nobody's checking against the contract. They may not even be checking against the receipts and all of this supplemental documentation. And that can be problematic. And that actually puts everybody at risk. It puts the intended parents at risk for losing money, the surrogate for not being paid appropriately for what was promised to her in the contract, and it can put the agency at risk. So if there's a mistake that's made, if escrow is being held, the agency's taking on that liability. And if there's a major mistake, that could be catastrophic to that agency. So it's super important. But it also is the biggest benefit, in my opinion, is that because we're managing off of that contract, what we're doing is that we're level setting for everybody, right? And we're taking all of that, those hard conversations that are about money that you really don't want the relationship to really be about. And so we're managing to that so that everybody else gets to enjoy the relationship and the experience and the journey, right? In fund holding, it's just passing through. And so there's a lot of risk involved in all of that. And a lot of mistakes can happen when escrow is merely being held.
I appreciate that. What would you say are the most common mistakes that intended parents, agency, or surrogates make when setting up before the escrow, that you see that could be, maybe we could make different changes or things like that, are the most common things that maybe parents and agencies and surrogates could think about before getting to even you? So in that legal process or before the legal.
Well, I think first and foremost, it's that escrow is so important. And so we can open escrow accounts before the contract is signed. And at that point, what we're doing is we're making sure we're still checking against receipts and so forth. We just don't have a contract to check against, but it's still, I think it's still an important piece of it, and it should still happen before the contract is signed, because we're still going to be, what we're going to be managing against is going to be the agency agreement that was signed with the intended parent. So we're going to use that agency agreement to then manage to all of the details and the estimated fees and everything that was promised by the agency prior to the direct agreement being signed, right? So we'll manage to all of those sorts of things, and we'll make it a lot easier. So when intended parents decide to open up escrow ahead of time, or when agencies direct them to do so, it makes it easy, because remember, with our platform, there's that full transparency. So everything's happening, that all of that documentation and all that clarity is being given on a platform that's online and available 24/7. And so it's in real time. So anytime a disbursement request is sent through, everybody has access to that. The surrogate gets to see what is being paid to her in real time, and then the agency and the intended parents can see everything that's paid to the agency, the clinic, for travel expenses and so forth and so on. So at the end of the journey, there's a full accounting of everything prior to the contract being signed and post the contract being signed. So to me, being a type A personality, I see that as a huge benefit, so that I can then say at the end of my journey, okay, here are all of the details pertaining to the finances, right? And it also is easy because everything can be sent electronically. Nobody has to deal with a check being sent here and being lost in the mail, or, you know, did I send that via PayPal, or did I send it via my Zelle? How did I pay for those things? So again, it's all very in one location, so that it makes it easy. And we're paying almost everybody electronically if they'll allow us to do so. So the attorneys can be paid electronically, the clinics, and so forth and so on.
I think that's amazing. I know for me as a surrogate, you know, and gone through it several times. And all transparency, this is my first time going through Seeds for my escrow. So I'm super excited currently. And it's been beautiful. Like, it's so seamless. It's not once a month that I have to put in my receipt. I can literally take a picture, upload it, give you guys the documentation, who's it going to, and know that it's like done, right? And so that's what I've been excited about as a surrogate, but also the like safety and the security. You know, especially in these times where it's like the economy, and, you know, we're not going to get into that, but there's so much going on in the world. For me to know that my finances for the surrogacy, obviously the compensation is not what's drawing me to this, but I could not imagine going into the surrogacy process, being pregnant with someone else's child, and then something happening in the world and me not having an escrow set up, that I'm pregnant and there's not any type of compensation, especially if there was to be bed rest or complications, like, or even my medical bills. Like, being in this industry, I've seen how exorbitant health insurance bills or liens, you know,
Right.
are currently. And so to be able to know, like, at the end of the day, the money's in there, you know, while that's not my priority, that money is in there. I can sleep knowing, like, if something is to happen, we still can fully fund this journey for the baby, for myself, for the clinics, for the, you know, everything that's included. And I think a lot of times surrogates don't realize that we are not the only part of this cost.
Well, that's exactly right. And the intended parents get that protection too, because it's sitting in a very secure location where it's protected, right? So that they know that that money is there and it's not going anywhere unless unless something comes through as far as a request, a disbursement request, and it matches against that contract, right? So they're getting that added level of protection too. And they have access to that 24/7. And our platform translates in many different languages. So for those intended parents who are international, they get all that clarity. So they're not being, penalized for being across the globe and not having the same access. We wanted to level the playing field for everybody involved. And so, so that's really important to us as well. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Now, I know one that's a big mistake, or that's a big confusion: lost wages. Do you have any tips on how to properly, because we have quite a few people that do independent journeys that watch our webinars too. And so we're not here for just our clients and our family of Surrogate First. We're here to kind of educate anyone in the field that wants the information. And we're trying to give a very unbiased, option. So we bring a lot of our providers, but lost wages seems to be a very confusing one: how to calculate, how to work that out. And I know if we get that situated before we come to escrow, that's probably a headache that's relieved on your end too, of having to explain and educate everybody on it.
Well, yes. So that's a really good point. So the first step in sorting that out is in the contract. So for anybody that's doing an independent journey, my first recommendation is to work with attorneys who specialize in third-party reproduction. Working with an attorney who is, maybe they've done litigation or real estate, it's not the same thing. So when you work with an attorney who has drafted many contracts, surrogacy contracts, that's first and foremost, because they are going to know how to draft so that they can sort through those issues that are very complex. And lost wages is a very complex piece of the contract that needs to be clearly defined, so that if and when there is a situation where there's bed rest, mandated bed rest, or post the delivery, that it's very clear and it states exactly how those lost wages should be paid out. So it starts with the contract. So then what we do as the escrow providers, we review that contract, and so the contract will either be written in gross or net wages, right? So that's the starting point. And then there will need to be proof of employment, right? So the contract might state something like, in order for lost wages to be dispersed, that there needs to be proof of employment via whatever it might be, the last 2 or the last 4 pay stubs, right? That's important language to be to be stated in that contract, so that as the escrow provider, we know exactly what we're looking for and how to base those lost wages. So, let's say a surrogate was employed when she started her journey, but then she decided to leave her employment. There should be something in the contract that states that she needs proof of employment, right? Because if she's no longer working, then that might affect those lost wages, of course, right? So that language needs to be very clear cut and very precise in those contracts.
I appreciate that, because I know it's confusing. Net, gross, hourly changes, or people that are on, commissions. And so that's definitely something that needs to be talked about at the match meeting, if there's any, things like that, or even before, when looking at a profile that should be, labeled. But if they're independent, definitely looking at that would be really important.
They can't be boilerplate sort of contracts, because everybody's situation is different, right? If you're a 1099 employee versus, a salaried employee, that's a different scenario, right? So the way that contract should be written it's going to be very different, right, between those two scenarios. So really splitting hairs in that particular portion of the contract is critical. Mm-hmm.
What happens if there's a disagreement? So, and maybe you can kind of explain, because I've seen this in the groups, where someone will say, I didn't get my reimbursement. One, we don't know if it's in the contract of what they're trying to but what happens if there's a disagreement, or someone puts in for something that's not in the contract?
If there's not something in the contract, so that we'll start with that. So let's say that a disbursement request is submitted, but there's nothing in the language of the contract that states that it shall be paid out, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to hit the pause button at SeedTrust Escrow, and we're going to then reach out to the parties who are involved and inquire, right? So let's say that the surrogate is submitting her disbursement request for self, right, in the platform. What we're going to do is we are going to, communicate with the surrogate that, listen, we appreciate you submitting this disbursement request. We have to hit the pause button. We can't process it yet because there's nothing in the language of the contract that states that we should. So we're going to go to the intended parents and to the agency and inquire about this, right? So at that point, everybody starts to have conversations around this. And if it's something very minor, and it seems like it's going to be helpful in terms of managing the relationship and making sure that the parties still are on the same page and are happy with the match, then typically what will happen is those intended parents will say, go right ahead. We didn't think about this during the drafting of the contract. We're completely happy to approve this. And then we will just need written approval for that by those intended parents so that we can move forward and approve that disbursement request and move forward. Now, if it's something more complex, right? If there's something that, there's confusion and maybe there's even a little bit of tension, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to hit the pause button again. We're going to go to those parties. And first and foremost, we're going to listen to what is the real issue, right? Is it based on emotion, or is it based on something that's factual and that would perhaps harm the health of that unborn baby, right? So we're going to really vet out those sorts of things. And hopefully what's going to happen is that those parties, the intended parent and the surrogate, will come to an agreement and we can move forward and make the approval that way. Now, if it's something that's contentious, where there's just an agreement cannot be made between the surrogate and the intended parent, then what will happen is we will, of course, let the agency know if there is an agency involved, but ultimately we will go back to the drafting attorney and the attorney who's representing the surrogate to ask them to make a final decision on whatever the dispute is, and then we'll move forward accordingly. We'll either pay it based on, the attorneys agreeing and moving and offering their opinions to the surrogate and the intended parent, or if the decision is made that it will not be paid, we will not process that.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How long does it normally take? Say I put in a request today.
Mm-hmm.
How long does it normally take for that if it's is a correct charge to reach my bank?
Sure. Okay. So first and foremost, if it's easy breezy and it meets the language of the contract, we process disbursement requests within 2 business days. Okay. Now, what we love is when surrogates, agencies, everybody involved has put in their direct deposit information, because all we have to do then is to send that money to those accounts.
Yes.
Now, if there's no account information, if there's no direct deposit information, then we're going to have to send it in another way. And the last, what we really don't want to have to do is to cut an actual check and send it to the mail, because that can take many, many, many days and it can get lost.
Oh, and it can get lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've seen it happen, so yeah, no, I'm thankful that it's direct deposit.
Yeah. Yeah. But 2 business days. So that's how long. So as long as it meets the language of the contract, then we promise everybody 2 business days, mm-hmm. and then it will be processed. Now, then based on how it gets dispersed, that's the other question, is how long will it take to get into the bank account? Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay. So disbursement, is that more so on the bank side of it then? Like how long they hold on, or they release it into your account? Is that?
Yeah. So the receiving bank is going to be the final decision maker in terms of how their process works. But as long we process it, send it over, and it's out of our bank account, or out of the account and into the other account. And then the receiving bank is sort of the final deciding factor.
And sometimes those banks can take several days, can't they?
Yes. And especially when it's an international situation where it's leaving, it's leaving the account and it's going into an international bank, that can take a little bit longer. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know I assume, just like agencies at times, you get the brunt of the complaints, even when maybe it's out of your hands at that point.
Right. Right. The good news is that when we explain that to individuals, they typically understand, like, oh, I get it now, right? It's sort of like, if you make a charge on Amazon and then you go, I didn't really want this, right? So then it takes you like another 7 business days to get your money back, even though they deducted it out of your account immediately, right? So it's sort of the same premise, right? Yeah.
Got it. Anything you'd want to share that we didn't get to cover that you think is important for intended parents or surrogates to know about escrow, and maybe, what to look for in an escrow? I mean, we talked about you guys and the importance of the bonds and things like that, but if you could give anybody kind of advice, what would it be?
Well, I think, so a lot of times, and I was the same way, right? So when I was an intended parent, I was like, let's just do everything all in one place. Like, we don't have to worry about having separate providers for this, that, and the other thing. What I will say is that now that I'm in this industry, it's better to have everybody who is specialized in what they do to outsource that, right? So your agency is basically the person, they're going to be the organization that organizes everything and keeps everything moving forward and manages the relationship. But when it comes to the attorneys, they need to be specialized. They need to be, specialized in third-party reproduction. Escrow companies should be specialized and independent and a third party, right? So intended parents sometimes will want to just allow their attorneys to hold escrow for them because they think it's easier, right? But here's the recommendation I would make to you. Think about what your attorney is specialized in. They're specialized in drafting those contracts and reviewing them for the surrogate side. When it comes to escrow, that's not their expertise, right? So they typically don't have online platforms where there's full transparency, and they take longer to process payments because, again, that's not their specialty and that's not what they're really hired to do, right? So what I've heard from surrogates is when attorneys hold escrow, sometimes it takes longer to receive compensation, that the intended parents don't have full transparency. And from the agency point of view, if a mistake is made, you're holding on to that liability and to that risk. So make sure that anybody that you are working with is really specialized in what they do.
Awesome. I really appreciate you for your time. And so I just thank anyone who is watching this video, whether you're an intended parent, a surrogate, with an agency, independent. If you do have any questions about this webinar or if you reach out to me through email or any of my social media platforms, I will point you in the right direction. We're all part of the same community, so it doesn't matter where you're coming from. We want you to get to where you need to go. So you can reach out to me at Ashley, ASHLEY, at surrogatefirst.com, SurrogateFirst.com. Or you can, meet me on our website, which is just surrogatefirst.com. There's ways to book appointments for parents for a consult or for surrogates. We are always a no match, no fee agency. So just know that if you meet with us for a consult, there is no fee. We're going to give you the information. And actually, in one of our first consults, we do give you the link for seats. So we try to get you out to all the professionals and to make sure that you're educated in this process. If you do have any questions, you can Google them. They're like in the top of the escrows in this field. So it would be SeedTrust. And so you can find them easily on Google, on any of the social media platforms. I know they're on Facebook. And are you guys on Instagram?
We're on Instagram too. Yes, we are. Mm-hmm. And
okay.
LinkedIn.
And I'm waiting for a TikTok. I'd like to see Brock and Adam do some dancing. We'll see, maybe next year. But yeah, so you can reach out to us. We want to just thank you for your time, Denise. As always, you guys have amazing products, and you have a great foundation for, why you have such a big heart for this industry and helping these parents. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll talk later.
Bye.
Bye. I'll cut out because I don't know how to stop recording.